This episode is brought to you by TruAmerica Multifamily, one of the nation's leading multifamily investment firms, with nearly 60,000 attainable rental housing units under management. This month, TruAmerica celebrates its 13-year anniversary with a commitment to building better communities. On today's episode, Quincy Allen and Neville Rhone, co-founders and managing partners at Hart Capital Partners, both join Bob on the podcast.
Good afternoon. I'm Bob Hart, President, CEO, and founder of TruAmerica Multifamily, and the sponsor of Building Better Communities by none else than myself, Bob Hart. But today I'm proud to be here with two very fine gentlemen that are good friends and fellow CEOs and leaders in our industry, Mr. Neville Rhone and Mr. Quincy Allen. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for calling us fine.
That's who you are. Yeah. You're very erudite and fine, as long as I've known you. And I've watched you on a board, so I've been on a board with you, so I know the other side of you. And I've known Quincy for a long time too. But you're in the firm that you started in 2013, Arcs Capital, is an allocator to developers. You're doing creative structures with a lot of infill urban type projects, which is really a takeoff from your years at Candid Johnson when you were doing similar things.
Right.
So maybe let's talk about the trajectory of how we got to ARCs in 2013 and the evolution of that in your thinking and where we came to today. You both have very impressive backgrounds. Between the two of you went to 3 Ivy League schools. You went to one twice, so you have a great professional pedigree. So let's talk about how it all started. And I'll start with you, Neville. Sure. I know you grew up in Jamaica. Mm-hmm. You came to the United States to be educated. Take us from there.
Sure. Well, so yes, I came to the U.S. from Jamaica, but let's just be clear. I was born in the United States, but came here because family came here to create a better life, right, for all us all, and went to undergrad.
How old were you when you came here?
I was, 9 years old, 9 years old.
Were both
right.
parents Jamaican?
Yeah, that's right.
You were born here in New York, or where?
Actually, yes, born in Jamaica, Queens. Actually.
Jamaica, Queens.
Yep, believe it or not.
How
and we
appropriate.
moved, from there to Jamaica, Kingston, when I was about 2 years old.
I'm actually an investor in a building near Jamaica Station.
Oh, really? Well, there you go.
There you go.
Okay.
It's a very urban area.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
So it really started at a very young age.
Well, you know what? I mean, you'll see the patterns as we talk about what we do, but we're big believers in the built environment, right? Access to jobs, people, connectivity, culture, amenities, what have you. And so, with that, it's always been sort of in my, call it DNA, right? And I think Quincy could say the same thing.
Because you're urban guys.
Yeah, I mean, we're truly, I would say, well, as we both know, right, it's hard to create and build new, right? Yes. And just very simple economics, if you have a situation where it's harder to create supply generally, things go well if you have demand, right? And your pricing power, et cetera, and value. So that was sort of certainly something that we understood very well growing up, but also not only as individuals, but also as professionals, right? And so whether it be time growing up in Miami when we came here from Jamaica, to high school, and undergrad, ended up in New York City and Wall Street there.
Right, after Cornell.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
But you majored in engineering and got a master's in engineering.
That's right.
And civil engineering.
That's
so
right.
That's
right.
A lot of symbiosis there.
That's right.
With myself.
That's right.
But it's obvious you were interested in doing something else beyond engineering.
Absolutely. And I think I'm going to detour a little bit to talk about how that happened, and then Quincy should talk about his background too. But while I was 17 years old, and I was a member and a senior leader of the American Society of Civil Engineers.
I remember that. I was a member
ASCE,
too.
right?
Back a very long
so we're
time
in the
ago.
inside. That's right, exactly, right. And then another group, and so there was a project in the community center in Ithaca that was stalled out, right? And what I took on was marshaling volunteers, raising the money, building what was a playground for the community, right? Took Cornell to
Wow.
Ithaca downtown in the community center.
So you were building better communities back then.
Yeah, that's right.
Not just financing better communities, but building them.
You have it exactly right, right? And so I was at the time, right? We used to use T-squares, right, back then.
I remember T-squares. I remember protractors.
There you go, right? And I was like, well, I don't want to have this be my life going forward, only engineering in this sort of one lane. Nothing against it, but that's just not my world.
How about Fortran cards? Did you use those?
Fortran cards.
Or maybe you were after that.
No,
okay,
exactly
I'm
that.
really dating myself.
No,
But no, I interrupted you.
But the broader point was once I saw what it means to frankly inspire people, build, design, raise money. I mean that's a quasi-financing, quasi-development role. And as my eyes opened to that, that's when I ended up moving beyond engineering and then ultimately getting a master's in engineering management and civil engineering at the time to kind of take that path into skill set building that would take me to where we are today as part of the story, right? And so in any event, like I said, it started with the community service project, candidly, right, as to how I went from civil engineering to operations, development, finance, private equity.
Well, there's a guy that served as president for 8 years from Chicago who started out as a community organizer.
Oh yeah,
I think we know who he is, Mr. Barack Obama.
That's right.
Yeah.
Quincy, let's talk about yourself. You're a Detroit guy.
Yes.
Grew up in, I don't know what part of Detroit, but Detroit itself is urban.
Yeah.
And I understand that even to this day you're a loyal Detroit sports fan as well.
I am. I've adopted the LA teams as well because my son raised my son here, but still loyal to Detroit teams as well. So.
Yeah, so talk about a little bit about what that was like growing up in Detroit and how you emerged from there to, I know you went to Wayne State and then ultimately to Harvard.
Sure. So in Detroit, that's where I was born and bred on the West Side, and effectively, just great upbringing, great family. My dad was a musician, so jazz musician, composer, arranger. So spent some time at Motown and then also Stax Records. But also, in general, he was an entrepreneur, right? So I'm one of 7 kids. I'm the youngest. And he raised us all, and we all went to college, came out with no debt.
Did any of your siblings go into music?
We all played, but he was the professional. I played clarinet and saxophone.
Wow. Okay.
So more classical. He was a jazz pianist, but also arranger, composer, and what have you. And so, growing up at that time, it was, this is in the 70s, but my older siblings grew up in the 60s, and you can imagine what that's like in the Midwest. But great upbringing, and effectively went to Wayne State where I majored in finance. And so. Got interested in real estate because of a professor in a night class who said, he was African American professor and he owned apartment buildings, and so he really.
So he was an entrepreneur as well.
He was an entrepreneur as well, and so it seemed quite fascinating that he said when he went to sleep he was still making money, and so I said, okay, that sounds like a pretty good industry to me, and so I went to work. Didn't go to work in real estate. At that point in time, it's very hard to understand kind of all the different.
Who was your first job with out of Wayne State?
Ford Motor Company. Worked in corporate finance.
Okay.
Yeah, so in undergrad, I actually went to go study in Japan for a year, came back, applied to business school, and got a deferred admittance to Harvard Business School. So they said, you're in, but you need some work experience.
Yeah.
So worked in corporate finance at Ford Motor Company, and then went off to Harvard Business School. But still with kind of the dream of, hey, that commercial real estate class that I took in undergrad?
You got the bug.
I got the bug. I got the bug in undergrad. So
very early.
Very early.
And your career before forming ARC and going before that to Canyon really started to evolve through, I believe you were with Security Capital.
That's right.
Which was a great firm led by Bill
Bill Sanders.
Bill Sanders.
Yeah.
Which later became Archstone.
That's right.
And that must have laid a very strong foundation for you in the operations of real estate.
No, absolutely. It was. I was I was blessed to kind of go from Harvard Business School, Boston, and then my first job was in Santa Fe, New Mexico, of all places. In Santa Fe is where Bill Sanders set up shop with Security Capital Group, and you mentioned it, Bob, that he had started Prologis, Archstone Communities, Regency Centers, and other REITs at a time. He's really a contemporary of Sam Zell, right? So they were kind of contemporaries.
They're kind of a gentler version, I think.
So to speak.
Yeah.
But they.
I talked to him once on the phone many years ago.
Yeah. And you know, created, you know, this was at the dawning of the public REIT age, and so coming out of the RTC days. So we were, you know, the job was, we were based in Santa Fe, but we were going around buying apartment portfolios, industrial properties, and what have you. So I spent time on the industrial side and the multifamily side with those guys. So
you did. So that's
cut my teeth there. Had some great mentors like Scott Sellers from Archstone Communities, Connie Moore, Dane Brookshire.
A lot of great
alumni. Just a lot of great alumni. You know, that went on to either head other shops and what have you. So it's a fantastic training ground.
What year did you leave Archstone?
Right around 2000. So
before the breakup.
Before the breakup, before the Lehman acquisition and the subsequent breakup. But great training ground.
Sometimes it's better to leave things alone.
That's true.
You know, Archstone was such a great company on its own.
That's right.
And set so many high standards in the industry.
Oh, it was a fantastic company. That
great alumni.
Great alumni network, right up there with the Avalon Bays, the EQRs, and what have you, and you know, certainly a national brand.
Yes.
There's a time when we were trying to create a national brand and platform,
which is a very hard thing to do.
It was a very hard thing to do
because you have so many diverse regions of the country.
That's right. That's right.
So I'm sure that laid a lot of foundation in your thinking about the future and where you guys wanted to be. So let's talk about that a little bit. You know, you both started around the same time at Canyon, I believe.
That's right.
Yeah. And Canyon was, I think, it had been established already, I think, as didn't they start more like not a hedge fund, but like a...
That's exactly right, actually. I mean,
Was
it's a
it-
multi-strategy hedge fund.
Right.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
main mothership of Canyon.
That's the main
where we work
mothership.
for.
You don't
That's
hear
right.
about that as much as you do, at least we don't, the real estate side
Right.
and the lending side. So you guys came in there both with some experience,
Right.
Fresh faces.
Right.
Talk about that environment, what it was like. Did you work with Magic at all? Because he did a lot of infill stuff, I know, in LA.
Yeah.
Maybe talk
Sure.
about that a little
Yeah,
bit for the
yeah.
benefit of the viewers.
Definitely, you can jump in on that a little bit, but one thing that I thought was pretty remarkable about the team and the experience there was that, so we were a hedge fund, right? And so the idea was that, where can we find misassessed, mispriced opportunities across all asset classes, right? And real estate was one of them. And within real estate, whether, we actually invested debt, mezz, preferred equity, joint venture, direct.
A lot of places in the capital stack.
In the entire capital
But not
stack.
as owners of, I believe, real estate. It was more allocators.
More allocators, sometimes we became owners.
Value investment.
Yes, I know.
About that.
I know the yields were very high.
Right. Right. But the bigger point though was that the umbrella was how can we find something that's mispriced and what can we do to create value ultimately. That's sort of their umbrella. And
Well, the impact lending and the whole impact side of Canyon, did that start when Magic became affiliated?
Yes.
And he was doing the project down on Crenshaw? Or was it
no.
even before that?
That was before our partnership with Magic. We did partner with Magic after that to create a series of funds focused on the urban space, right, and reinvesting back in the cities largely across the country. And as you know too, right, there was at the time a sort of an evacuation of population and bodies from the downtowns and the kind of the urban villages around these areas. That's reversed, right? And so seeing that all sort of play out in the evolution of where you spend your time, what call it communities you're serving, and how you do it was something that we definitely give a lot of credit to Earvin Magic Johnson for discovering, because that is value investing, by the way, which I think people don't really pick up on that. It's really how are we seeing value that others don't see?
It's not only seeing it, it's providing access to capital in the inner city. Now, today, that's a lot more popular,
Right.
25 years later.
That's right.
But then, I guarantee you, a pension fund's sooner to invest in Century City than they are down,
That's
call
right.
it south of USC.
That's right. And that was part of the what Neville talked about in terms of value investing. And that was part of the beauty of it, was the fact that it was really bringing institutional capital to urban areas, right? To urban infill areas.
Right.
Where traditionally, like Neville had mentioned, it was kind of the other side of the tracks. Again, this was pre-iPhone 25 years ago. This was before you knew to find the best ramen shop on this side of town, or the best, taco spot on this side of town, or whatever the case may be. So it really was at a time where you needed some credibility in the urban areas. You needed to understand the neighborhoods and what have you. And quite frankly, that was one of the reasons why attracted to going to Canyon, was the value investing thesis of Canyon itself, being in a hedge fund, but also the opportunity to work with Earvin and his team and what have you, and bring that credibility to the urban areas, and basically say, okay, we have the capital side and the value investing side and the financial acumen down from Josh and Mitch and the founders of Canyon, who are still great mentors to this day, but also Earvin as well. Right?
Yeah.
And so marrying those two together and saying, okay, this makes a lot of sense. How can we bring institutional capital? How can we raise the capital, find the right development projects and what have you, in order to access that appropriately?
Magic has done a tremendous job evolving from basketball player to elevating into a serious businessman. And so what was it like working with him and his team?
Look, it was fantastic. I mean, you're talking to someone from Detroit, from Michigan. Yeah. That's where he's originally from in terms of Michigan State and what have you. I mean, to me, it was like a pinch me moment when they said, "Hey, we want to." I was working at an investment bank in New York and got recruited out to LA, and I'm thinking, okay, I'll go out to LA.
So
for
that's
2
what
years.
brought you here, and you here,
That's
right?
what brought
Yeah,
me
pretty
here.
much, yeah.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, yeah.
So you were in New York at the time,
I was in New York.
and you were in.
You know what? Well, two things. One is you came out, before I did.
I did.
Right.
A couple
I was a couple years after, but I was in New York at the time as well, and then came out from New York with a young family. When I joined Canyon, as well. Yep.
Yeah, so you both took the plunge, shall we say?
Yeah. Said it'd come out for 2 years, and 20 plus years later, here we are.
So, but again, that was at a time when Canyon was really starting to innovate its impact investing. That was really, I don't know if it was at the very beginning, but I would say near the beginning. And that continues today, I believe. They're still doing that kind of investing.
I think so, candidly, but I think it's interesting. The term impact, it didn't exist really back then, right? I mean, I think at the time it was really, how do you make a great return, and how do you do it in a way that's responsible for the places where you're investing, and then how do you do it so that you're helping, right? I mean, in reality, the investors that we're representing are oftentimes teachers, right? Nurses, doctors,
the beneficiaries
police.
of those investments, yeah.
So it's a virtuous circle, right, that, I think is very much still focused on dollars and cents, right? And so that's kind of
picking sponsors and borrowers that, you knew you were going to hopefully get paid back from, and projects that made sense.
Yep. That's right.
I mean, that's what you're doing today.
Yeah.
But maybe talk about some of that dynamic tension from the early days, because that obviously led to the next step, which was 2013 when you formed ARC.
In terms of the Canyon days, I would say, what Neville talked about was the fact that we were doing double bottom line investing, right? How can we, most importantly,
Explain double bottom line, because some people, it's a commonly used term,
yeah,
but I'm not sure everybody is familiar with it.
Basically means making great sound investment opportunities. So you got to make sure you make money, you have performance, right? You got to perform. But at the same time, where are you kind of training your lens in order to do that? And so we were training our lens in urban America, where oftentimes, whether or not you were in Seattle or Miami or Boston or San Diego, these were neighborhoods that were often kind of misperceived and misassessed.
Or underserved.
And certainly in terms of capital. And so I know Neville grew up in Miami, I grew up in Detroit, where it wasn't about that people didn't have great ideas, they didn't have the access to capital.
No.
And so being able to get access to that capital to create development developments across the board where you could have significant impact and make an imprint at the same time while being a great fiduciary and really be focused on great performance. And that's what the double bottom line balance really is.
Yeah, so it's kind of trying to do some good while you're doing well.
That's right.
That's what we talk about in the world here.
Yeah, well, that's
But
true. That's
it's
true.
easier said than done because these projects and the folks that are leading them have to pass the test of your qualifications and underwriting and so forth, like anything else. And they may be pioneering projects.
So that's, I think, an important distinction.
Talk about a few of the projects.
Yeah. I mean, in reality, well, I mean, we'll just sort of encapsulate. So there was a window in time where that was a space where a market was underserved. And what we saw was that, particularly with the size of funds, when you have multi-billion-dollar funds, you have to be, really focused on much larger deals.
Yeah, and then there's an impetus to put money out.
Yeah, got to put the money out, right? Then when you have larger deals, and candidly, a lot of folks who have multi-billion-dollar funds, and so what happens is that those deals become riskier overall, right? And then we said, we saw, well, in the middle market, when you're looking at those opportunities where it's relationship-driven, it's fragmented, storied.
Define
right?
that category, the middle market. How would you bracket it?
Yeah, so I would say in terms of property size, asset size, anywhere in the low end from $30 million, right, to say $120 million, right, in that window.
Isn't that amazing how much that number's increased
I
over
know.
the last 10 years?
Yeah, I know.
Where an entrepreneur can really buy a 9-figure deal. And
It used to be 10 to 50, right?
It's true. Yeah, this is absolutely right. And I think that also, and this is a comment on the environment too, in terms of the capital sources, but there are many larger players out there that cannot invest in a $120 million asset because they're way too big. Right? When you look at
There's too much allocation.
around the corner here,
Yeah.
there's Ares and there's Blackstone and there's Brookfield. I mean,
No, when we have a deal here that's over, call it 150 million, the list starts to get much smaller. It's just the way it is.
right. That's just it's just the nature of what.
And
what's
also
going
you
on,
need
right?
chunkier amounts of equity now in the higher interest rate environment we're in.
That's right. That's right. And so what does that mean, right? So it means that if you look in this lens, not up here, but in here, and then there's more opportunity set, to work with, and in many respects, our name ARC comes from.
Yeah, what does it
the
come
story. It's a story of a deal,
the arc
an arc of a story, a narrative arc, right, of what we're talking about, right? And so every investment, every relationship, every deal is a story in some capacity.
Absolutely.
How do we identify it, and what are we doing that's special, so that we can, really approach the middle market in a way that's differentiated from what others do. And so that all came from our lessons from, not only Canyon, but, Wall Street, being a developer, all those things. And we saw that let's focus on the middle market, right? Let's think about the story and the work around creating value, right? And then ultimately, if you do those things, you could be a great fiduciary over time and have fun while you're doing it. So that's sort of how it all came together because, we've been through it. We've been through, let's see, the dot-com bust, 9/11, the GFC. Before that, actually, and I was
RTC
granted that.
crisis.
Yeah, I was going to say RTC, right?
Well, now you're going back to the 90s.
Right? Yeah, seriously, right? I mean, that was all part of our reality. That was what we saw and understood and learned from coming up, over the last.
So speaking of definitional crises, you both navigated the GFC while at Canyon.
Right.
So coming out of that, we were starting to come out of that in 2010-ish or so, but I think putting deals together was still a little bit sensitive, shall we say?
Sure.
A lot of people didn't want to be first, just like right now, post this sort of interest rate rise, institutional investors don't want to necessarily be first.
Right.
But you were germinating the thought of forming ARC.
Right.
Talk about that in terms of your thinking, inflection point, how you made that call it 2 years out of the last of that cycle. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think one of the key lessons we've learned in business is to make sure you have a great partner. And so, Neville and I had an opportunity to work together for almost a decade. And so we were in the trenches together, right, in the middle parts of our career. So I think it was, whether or not you're presenting to IC, you're talking to lenders, you're negotiating JV docs, you're in front of investors, right, in terms of LP investors. You're always just
negotiating,
treating people,
managing
people, and what have you. So we were the senior MDs within the Canyon Johnson Urban Fund. We were on the IC for Fund 3, it was $1 billion fund.
Debt fund as well. Yeah.
We were also on the debt fund, and there's different strategies and offshoots and what have you that we were instrumental in. And so in reality, we looked at it and said, what's kind of the arc, right? Where are we going in terms of our careers? Where's the cycle? Where are we in the cycle coming out of the GFC days? Sort of all of that needing to
You're
kind of line
both
up.
kind of in your early, mid-ish 40s at that time?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right.
That's good timing.
Yeah, good timing. 20 years of building blocks of really saying, okay, he's been at Wall Street, I've been on Wall Street, private equity shop, worked together, started out in a publicly traded REITs, started out as a developer. All the building blocks, all the foundation was there, be it finance, operations, asset management, everything else. The only thing left was, do we do it ourselves or not?
Right.
And that's the point that we got to of saying, do you sign up for another tour of duty of saying, okay, this is what I want to do at a bulge bracket shop like this for the next 7-10 years? Or do we cast out and figure it out?
So there was no proverbial gun to your head. You both had great jobs. You had very senior positions there.
Mm-hmm.
But yet there was this sort of mental inflection point that you had reached.
That's right.
And were you both there at the same time, or was one of you ready to jump into the 60-degree water while the other one wanted to stay in the spa at 90 degrees or 100 degrees?
I think it went back and forth.
Yeah,
but go ahead.
No, but it always,
you
when I formed this company, it was a hard decision, a very hard decision. And I was 10 years older than you guys. So it's not easy to leave like you say, a recognized bulge bracket kind of enterprise that's, you're part of the fabric there.
That's right.
So talk about that inflection point for the benefit of some of the mid-career and younger people that's struggling with the same decision.
Well, I'll tell you, no question. Like you said, it was very hard to make the move and think it through. I think you probably you're more tilted to doing it, and I was more tilted to sort of staying.
So Quincy was the kind of nudging you a little bit.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that.
You still nudge him?
All right.
I don't know. We didn't want to go from the ivory tower to the dining room table, but we did for about 2
So
or 3
let me
weeks.
ask. Okay, I want to get into this a little bit. So, is he the more conservative one in your decision process, and you're a little more the dreamer? Or?
Yeah. I think we're both pretty conservative because
You are,
we both
okay.
had kind of institutional backgrounds.
Right.
But it was more of, if you don't do it now, when will you do it?
Exactly.
Right. And so the increments of how far into the cycle do you get coming off of the GFC?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
How far
Yeah,
into your career?
earlier.
What's the next rung in your career? Right.
Am I starting too late?
Right.
Maybe I'm starting too early.
Maybe.
Maybe I don't have the right capital behind me yet.
That's right.
When you started, I don't think you had the Cal Stirs program behind you yet.
Nope.
So what'd you start with? What did you start with?
Just a lot of gumption and personal, resources.
You hung out a
But,
shingle.
Basically that was it. We just said, hey, let's go do it, right? All you can do is you try to, you sort of listen to the laws of physics in a way, right? And the industry is going this way. You think there's an opportunity is this. How do we set ourselves up to kind of catch that wave, right? And so we were fortunate. We had a great partner and a family office called Columbia Pacific Advisors that pretty much backed us in the early days. It was a very, call it organic, authentic conversation about our plans. And they believed in it because in addition to our general sort of background and what have you, are focusing on what was a significant demographic shift, right? In these places where we spend time was compelling to them too, right?
So they helped with the overhead and the initial startup, as well as maybe some guidance capital.
Some of the certainly in terms of the kind of call it the startup cost, but also with a handful of initial investments that we started to execute as well.
Okay,
we
so
had
they were your
investments,
GP, LP.
Yeah.
Wow.
All
okay.
All of the
But I'm sure you were investing somewhat with them, I'm sure.
Of course.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so, what was the first deal? And how long did it take to get that on the boards?
I think our first deal was it was a multifamily property in Austin, Texas.
Okay.
Right, and this was as a Class B asset. It was built in 1972.
Yeah.
Right. We knew the owner directly, like from my time and just what we've done in Austin already. And let's see, I think it was like yeah, not the good old days. It was like a 7.4 cap rate, right?
I can't.
Yeah, can you know that? Yeah, think about that.
Sometimes things revert back. I haven't seen that yet, though.
I know, right? Think
So,
about that.
what position were you guys in on that deal?
In that one, we were we financed the GP and provided some LP capital in the structure,
Okay.
right there. And ultimately, the goal was to go in and redo it to get it to a kind of a standard that would work well with younger folks who were in and living around that area of Austin. This is in, they call it the 78704 area code. This is South Austin, right? And a location that had long been sort of overlooked because it was not the kind of Southwest, or it wasn't West, or what have you, right? And so, so in any event, we
So
went
Texas,
in
you
there to do
started
well.
out in Texas.
We did.
I know you have a lot of experience in Texas.
That's right.
Prior
Right.
life and this life.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
so Austin, Texas
Both
was the first flag that got planted, the first arc flag.
That's right.
But one other thing to add too is that it was really important because oftentimes you would think that folks with our background, having worked at our shops and what have you, would go out and immediately go raise a fund.
Yes.
In terms of becoming an investment manager, right? But what we realized was that in reality, we had $6 billion plus of experience at that particular time, even more so if you go back in our careers, but you get very little credit for that if your name wasn't on the door. And so in reality, it became obvious to us in those early months that everyone wanted to, from the investment side, wanted to talk about deals more so than kind of a platform, right? And this is different, right? Today there's other, there's other kind of opportunities and investors and platforms, and the world has evolved within commercial real estate over the past 10 to 15 years. So it's different today than what it was, 10 plus years ago.
So when you're saying that, you mean that when you approached investors, that they didn't want to talk about a blind pool of sorts. They wanted to talk about, show me the money, show me a deal
That's right.
that I can.
That's right.
You guys have in your
That's right.
pocket.
And so what we did, rather than go out to go raise a fund and spend 2 years on the road doing that, we said, you know what? We needed to do proof of concept. We needed to go deal by deal. And so that's what we did. And so that's the first deal that Neville talked about, was proof of concept, that we were investing in key markets that had high growth, high barriers to entry, younger demographics, multicultural, and what have you, but also within food groups that we knew very well, either industrial, multifamily, or retail. But we needed to identify a set of opportunities, execute on them, build a track record separate and apart from what we had done for 20 years prior. Right. And so that's
exactly.
why we had to start from day one, build it from the ground up. And so that's what we did, was go deal by deal with the support of Columbia Pacific, and they were able to kind of nurture it along.
Although you both had a leadership track record, because you didn't own the other firms, that track record was not necessarily portable in the sense.
Not to the level of detail that,
Not
you
to the
would
same
use
level
for-
of detail,
Right.
right?
Right.
That's a challenge for any new firm.
That's right.
But you
Exactly right.
overcame that.
Though I will say that it's pretty funny. I mean, and you know this fundraising world, but we said we didn't want to spend 2 years raising a fund. It takes 2 years to raise a fund today.
Sometimes it takes more than that, trust me.
Right?
That's right.
That's if everything
That's
goes
right.
well.
I was being kind. It might have taken us
Yeah,
4
exactly.
at
It
that
goes
point
well.
in time.
Yeah,
so I
seriously.
said, it just we knew we'd have to double it.
But yeah, it's pretty. It does speak to the right. The
right.
cycles we're going through, right? I mean, that's
So
just
you
reality,
had the
right?
Columbia
Yeah.
Pacific checkbook for a little while, or maybe you still have it, I don't know. What was the next phase of capital formation? Were you finding other LPs, or did that evolve into the CalSTRS relationship right
So
away?
in a nutshell, we had a bucket that we'd done with, with Columbia Pacific and other investors to build a track record. Our next was then with CalSTRS, and building through a more programmatic joint venture structure, another pool of assets, right? Prior to our fund that we started.
Right, so that was
about a
the
year ago.
precursor
So-
to your fund.
That's right.
With a real big institutional name. And you had a partner with is it Bellway?
Oh, probably Belay.
Belay.
Yeah, Belay advised CalSTRS through this all. That's right.
Oh, they were the advisor?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
okay. It was really you guys putting out the money. And this was part of their emerging manager program?
It was part of their emerging manager program. And so it was a way to basically go from deal by deal, basically, to create more scale. And
Fund
more,
of one, effectively.
And kind of fund of one, thank you. Fund of one, so therefore we would be able to not have to, it would make it more streamlined. So we were still deal by deal looking at these various opportunities.
But you had a
more of
captive bucket.
dedicated
It was
strategic
kind of thing,
capital.
if the shoe fit, they would wear it. I
That's
assume.
right, that's right.
Right.
That's
Right.
right.
Unless the feet were itchy. So you had kind of discretion in a box.
Effectively, that's
Yeah.
right, yes.
So what year was that? 2017, 15?
It was 16.
16. So about
First time, yeah, 16.
3-ish years into the platform. So now that's another step, if you will, toward ultimately becoming a fund manager.
Right.
Right.
Did you know you wanted to be a fund manager then, or were you still trying to
a good
figure this
question.
out?
It's a good question. I think I would say, for me personally, my happy place was more of a fund manager in terms of the, call it, right, finding the right opportunity, finding the right story, looking at spaces that, are appropriate. Less so being an operator per se, like going in and being the one first loss, risk. No offense. Sorry.
Isn't that fun?
But so if I was going to just say here's what is my happy place, but the world doesn't care about my happy place, right? The capital wants.
It does.
the
It just may
capital
not do
wants.
anything about it.
That's true.
So when you
So
started,
that was me. I mean,
Yeah.
different
No,
story, yeah.
Look, same thing in terms of the core competency is really kind of on the structuring side, the being an LP, but at the same time we had to go through what we needed to go through in terms of being closer to the real estate, implementing business plans,
absolutely.
being an operator. Being an operator for yourselves is very different than being an operator buying it when you're at a larger shop. So just going through that, okay, this business plan, these loan docs, how you navigate that business plan when it's off course, how do you get it back on course, all those different things, kind of that really hands-on. We needed to go through that to be an even better investment manager.
in your current book, what percentage of your transactions are ARC-led and sponsored versus third party?
So you're saying third party in terms of partnering with another sponsor, et cetera? Yeah, I would say the part that's with partnership or call it structured equity, right? And those kind of things is more like 80% of our book. 80%.
So still about a little higher percentage, the third party, the structured stuff.
Well, the structure is 80. The structure stuff is 80% of the portfolio is structure, third party, JV,
Got
what
it.
have you want to call it. 20% would I would say be more kind of direct.
Direct ARC-led.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you started the CalSTRS mandate together in 2016, was the mission the same to serve underserved infill high yield opportunities, or was the mission a little different?
You know what? I think ultimately the same, right? In terms of looking at the middle market space, high barrier to entry locations, and Sun Belt in territory. So in that respect, yes. And candidly now, especially in this environment, we'll talk about it, but in this environment today, right, being a solution for being a gap capital provider is the name of the game today, right? As you know, right, still today, transaction activities are 50%, 60% below peak.
Oh my God, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And the things that we're doing don't show up on those charts because we're going in and saying to an operator partner, let's go pay down your loan. Let's go fund that, cap. Let's go, if there's a little more CapEx to do, let's go help you fund that. But stay in place. We'll help you get out of this valley to the other side of it and create value for your partners and do it the right way in the communities too.
Well, you're
So
in
that's
many
more
ways
of
a
our
stabilizer.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I like that.
That's right.
You're
That's
very
right.
much a stabilizer, both through expertise and providing capital that may otherwise not be available.
That's right.
That's right.
It's almost like
That's right.
bridge equity, stabilized equity, like you said, basically to get from one side to the other side.
So I know you've done some urban projects in LA. I know you were involved in, I believe it was the Central Market. Which market was it downtown?
The well,
Is it
Chapman's
Chapman Market.
Market.
Okay,
I was
okay,
close.
Koreatown. Yes, yes, yes.
Involved
Okay,
with
yeah.
that.
Yes.
Done some projects, I think, with Jameson. Talk about the evolution there into some of these deeper urban projects, like in LA, where you're both, officed.
Sure, sure. Well, I mean, LA, as you know, is, what was it, like 5,000 square miles, right, in size, right? It's huge. And so we are a basically, right, a collection of urban nodes and urban villages. That's what LA really is. I mean, you just kind of cut through it all, right? There's
Really
no LA,
is.
right? And so when we said, we looked at Koreatown, and as you know, right, thousands of units of apartments being built, right? Amazing nightlife, that young people want to be a part of. And it draws from everywhere, all communities, not just one specific community.
People want to be part of
Right.
that energy.
Absolutely, right? The energy, the food, and everything in between. And so ultimately, that's the kind of thing that we like to be a part of, whether we are owning or investing or financing or what have you, right? Because the fundamentals are pretty good because it's hard to build anything new in that corridor, right? And it's also
all infill.
it's all truly infill, right? Truly walkable infill, and I would say a mixed-use environment, throughout, right? So Koreatown's one, but we'd love to invest in Culver City someday,
Sure.
right?
Right.
I mean, actually, we woke up, 10 years ago and did that then, right? But there's again urban villages that we're big believers in that are mid-rise, walkable, what have you. Unfortunately, I mean, that kind of means when you talk about LA, less in terms of true downtown, right? I mean, we're not, looking there a whole lot, just given the dynamic overall. But there are nodes that are pretty exciting. So out here, we in Koreatown, we just we invested at the time, and we're great partners with CalSTRS and with Belay and everyone to do our Chapman Plaza investment.
Great
which has-
infill location. Talk about Chapman Market and what that's all about and what you guys did there.
Sure, sure. Well, the thing that's really the story there is that it was an off-market opportunity. We'd known, through relationships, the ownership, off-market as well to kind of cut a deal, and they were dealing with a portfolio, right, to deal with a 1031, and we went there, and at the time, no one kind of remembers this now, but at the time, you go there, and let's just say the merchandising was less than ideal, right? The anchor tenant, and I'll try not to say anything.
More local.
The anchor tenant was
Local vendors.
Local mom and pop.
like I said, the anchor tenant.
Yeah.
Was a vaping store, a vaping, bar. That was the anchor tenant.
That
Right.
probably drew
So-
in a lot of
Right.
interesting characters.
I like that. Yeah. but that's the old way of thinking about things, right?
Yeah.
And so our way of thinking about things, well, pay attention to the community. We stopped by, and there was a Korean barbecue there that had a line of people from all walks of life and everywhere in LA, not just one specific demographic, who wanted to wait, 2 hours, 3 hours for Korean barbecue.
So it was a cult-like following.
That's right. In a center that really wasn't catering to more of that
Yeah.
versus kind of. So we saw what
As
it
I
could
remember,
be.
the entrance to that center is on a side street as opposed to on
That's right.
the main. Was it on 6th Street?
That's right.
It's on
That's
Sixth Street.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it broke all the rules of retail, right? The parking was in the back. The access was on the two side streets. But it had a very charming courtyard that, quite frankly, needed to be.
You needed to know to
You
go
need to
there
know
to,
to go there.
You did.
experience that.
That's right. That's
So you guys had a vision of something here.
That's right.
Besides the great Korean food that was being served
That's
there.
right.
So what did
Yeah.
you do with that operator, or how did you change the? How did you reposition it, shall we say?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, long story short is that we cleaned it up quite a bit, right? We re-merchandised and got rid of that vaping operator and vaping bar. Now there's a coffee store called Starbucks there, right in that location.
Wow. So you got a big national credit in
We
there.
did. And I will say, to give them credit too, I mean, they also packaged that particular unit for the area. So it feels more like a bar. It has, we insisted on, and then they had an Asian American do the artwork inside, and things like that. So there was really met the market in that respect. Then we went into something called a buzzsaw called COVID. Right.
Oh, while you still own Chapman.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Oh boy.
And talk about pivot. So because it was interior courtyard, historic, people still came there. But we had people who were sitting inside, right? And during lockdown, we took all those seats, brought them outside
Into the courtyard.
in the courtyard, and so it was a vibrant place. Like people were still okay and healthy, open air, and that helped well. So that's kind of say one example. But the other example that's even pretty interesting now that speaks to the environment we're in, and about Jameson, but we partnered with him to convert one of his office buildings on Wilshire to apartments.
Dr. Lee.
Right?
He had a lot of those buildings.
That's right.
He's done that same business plan 9 times, right? I mean, talk about track record, right? Talk about reinventing, right, what was already something that you had to deal with because it's office, right? At a great basis, by the way, right? So
An entrepreneur is entrepreneur.
truly,
Amazing,
truly.
amazing immigrant story. But so you guys ended up partnering with him.
We did.
But that's another way of seeing value too, right? Given where we are today in terms of the office market, right, and kind of a convergence in terms of his particular portfolio and his experience having converted office to residential, our local knowledge of Koreatown as well, and appreciating what Koreatown has. Chapman Plaza is just a few blocks from an opportunity that we did with Jameson. We're investors with him, and so. Not every building will be the right configuration. It needs to have the right, parking. It needs to have the right central elevator core.
wells.
Has light wells, depth, and what have you. And so there's a certain specificity and layout that's required and configuration for those buildings. And so we're able to identify the ones that are appropriate to do that, but then also provide housing within LA at a very good price point that's different than necessarily if we went ground up. Both are achievable, but they're also in neighborhoods that we like, right? So Koreatown and other places like that.
And
where
you're
we know it's
taking
vibrant.
what might be an office building that just doesn't fit the needs of the community anymore and creating housing, which we know is much needed, particularly urban housing.
That's right. We're taking something that was obsolete, per se, in terms of the configuration, what's needed today, to something that's in high demand.
And we're starting to see some of that movement coming back in New York and other places because of the transition in some of the office markets.
Correct. That's right.
Are you seeing those kind of opportunities across your desk?
We do for sure, and it's actually happening more in Texas as well these days, right?
Is that right?
The challenge has always been, though, yes, basis, right, ultimately. And so what we really loved about what we did here is that we recapitalized an asset, we turned it from what's obsolete to what is going to be, I think, high demand at a great basis. And it was a off-market, right, relationship-driven deal because we had credibility having done something interesting down the street, right? And so when we kind of wrap it all together, I mean, we joke about what we call it. We say we love MMA, right? You know what MMA means?
Middle market something?
Oh, very nice. Middle market alpha.
Alpha. You know what? I'm going to have to steal that from you.
Middle market alpha.
Isn't there a
right?
REIT, MMA, or there's an apartment REIT, I think, with similar initials, but
I'm trying to think.
I like it. Middle market alpha.
Right.
There you go.
That's right. So we love MMA, right?
Yeah.
And so how do we, kind of do that in these high barrier entry locations, right? With structure, oftentimes, right?
With
because the
that
fundamentals are good.
and providing your expertise, but at the same time knowing that there could be a sponsor there who you have to respect and work with.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
communicate with.
That's right.
So given the changes in the built environment, in terms of costs going up so high and, both labor, and now we're seeing this whole potential impact from tariffs on materials that could evolve. Have you evolved or changed your thesis about investment going forward, or how are you responding to that?
That's a good question. I mean, I think, namely, for us to look at anything that is new development oriented is even a higher bar. It was always a high bar,
Right.
and we always were not heavy on development business plans in general, but that is really, really challenging right now. We also, and actually I should zoom out a second. So we love middle income housing, right? We love industrial infill, but
Middle income being workforce?
yeah,
Workforce
yeah.
housing.
Right, right. We love the sort of the world of industrial, that's infill, right, high potential locations, but sometimes advanced manufacturing, high power, and then retail that is grocery anchored oftentimes, right, in terms of necessity.
So those are the food groups that you
Those
like.
are the main, food groups that we focus on. And so, but today, right, there's just these, call it significant headwinds with respect to being able to create that type of product, right? But rates have not changed enough. Interest rates haven't changed
they're
enough,
not.
right? And so we just continue to lean more into how can we help recapitalize those main food groups
Right.
throughout.
So is it a lot of gap equity in,
That's
in
right.
existing deals that need it?
That's right. And really, because rates have stayed higher for longer, that creates a lot of opportunity for us to provide that gap equity that you talked about. We're providing preferred equity, participating preferred, structured equity, where really we're coming in at a lower reset basis while the sponsor stays in, continues to work a business plan, looks to recapitalize, refinance with a new senior loan, call it 2 or 3 years from now, hopefully in a different rate environment. But then we're able to come in the JV portion of the deal, in the equity portion of the deal, not as mezzanine capital. So we don't need an intercreditor. We can actually come into the JV. So therefore we have different governance and control rights and what have you, but at the same time, we partner with the existing sponsor in order to get to the other side. And so the market dislocation, because there's been this great deleveraging going from, call it $100 million asset, which is now worth, call it 75, the loan that might have been at 65, quite frankly, now maybe they can only get 50 or 45. And so we come in with that 15 to 20 million.
That
They put in some
critical
fresh
gap
capital,
piece.
that gap piece. And so that's how we're thinking about the world today in those three food groups, where we have more knowledge, more relationships, and we feel like the supply-demand dynamic is still very strong.
So you're working to find those bespoke opportunities, shall we say,
That's right.
That's right.
and put the ARC brand over them.
That's right.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Each
So let me-
investment is a story.
Let me talk about your evolution also as people. I mean, you don't see that many C-suite black leaders in the real estate industry. There have been many names, but you've crossed that Rubicon. You're both co-CEOs. You've been doing it now for 10 years. You're established. How would you describe the navigation process of getting there as two black men in the real estate industry?
It really depends upon, those we've had as mentors as well, right? And we try to be good mentors to others as well. But, you've had Daryl Carter on your show,
Yes,
right?
he's a great friend.
Right.
And he's a great mentor to many people.
To many
and he's
people.
from Detroit.
And he's from Detroit, right? He went to the other high school, but I'll say that. But it's folks like Daryl, basically, right? And
So he's
they're super smart, super well connected, but also humble, and also willing to kind of reach a hand back and say, if I did it, you guys can do it too. And if there's a question, you can pick up the phone and call me at any time. And so I just think that's
No strings attached.
no strings attached. So, but you may have you have a different view as well,
Oh, well,
or
I mean,
additional view.
yeah, I mean, it's hard as hell. I mean,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
but you need those. But you need those
right.
mentors.
those.
You need
Everybody
Yeah,
does,
everybody
but
does.
especially
everybody
Yeah.
does.
if there's not enough.
That's right.
Yeah, sure,
Everybody
sure,
does.
right? I mean, I think I think it's important to, with the humility, there's gratitude too, right? And
Very much so.
it's no question too that others are looking to you, right, to be an example, right? But Some African American, some are Asian, some are white, some are.
It doesn't really matter as much as it does the person.
Yeah, it does, right? And I think
who provides that to you.
So,
Now, obviously,
certainly
Magic was coming from a different place as a great, famous basketball player. But did he serve in some capacity?
Oh,
As a mentor to each of you differently?
100%.
As Neville said, it comes from all walks of life. So it's not only Earvin, it's Daryl, it's Josh Friedman, it's others that have run institutional shops, investment managers, be it real estate, private equity, VC, whatever the case may be. What was that roadmap like? How do we kind of play off of that, understand where the pitfalls are, figure out where we could kind of lean in, depend upon both our skill sets, and figure it out. Basically, figure it out. So that was kind of how
you guys do.
Yeah.
Very well.
Yeah, as do you.
All right, so thank you. Look, you guys have done a lot of things right, but I'm sure once in a while there's a mistake that occurs somewhere. We're all human. What's the funniest mistake that he's ever made? Okay? And then we're going to turn the table on you. What's the funniest mistake that Quincy's ever made that you guys laugh about?
Wow.
Oh, do you want to go first?
Many.
Do I want to go first?
Yeah, actually, you looks like you want to go first.
No.
And I'm sure there's at least one or two.
Yeah, look, there's always something we can laugh about, right? And we got to keep it light.
Of course, it could be something simple.
Well, I'll tell you. Well,
all right. Let me hear from
I'm trying to.
You can
I'm
say
thinking
whatever.
about how I can say it without naming names, but it was a mistake, but it was the right thing to do, right?
Okay.
Okay.
I will.
You're gonna X out everyone's name.
you can just say
going through the So we were
Mr. C or Miss B.
We were
Or
at a certain place, another
which one?
place where we worked together. Another place. It wasn't necessarily ours.
Okay.
All right.
And
Okay, I'm trying to think.
Yeah,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
and let's just say that we would be, we get into the office like super early, right? At this other place,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, you get there before a lot of other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so there's one day that you didn't get there at the same time. Right? You weren't there at the time. And then, and
Oh,
somebody
what was
else.
he doing? Taking his kids to school, maybe?
Pilates, I don't know. What was I
Pilates?
It was
doing?
not Pilates. I know that.
Okay. So what happened?
But and then, but let's just say that somebody else gave him some grief about it, but that particular person was not performing.
Oh, a colleague
Right.
maybe, or
Yes. I'm keeping it very, very general.
okay.
Right. And he just was like, well, because you don't show up. That's why that happened. Right.
Okay.
And so everybody just completely lost it. Right.
Yeah.
And he called out that particular person. But it was the right thing to do. But in a way that
Quincy
Quincy's,
did.
Yeah, Quincy is much nicer than I am.
But even Quincy
he
has
kinda
his breaking
said-
point.
Yeah, he was like,
Even how affable he is.
exactly.
Yeah.
It was like, and he just said, he kind of showed the team that you can't have a different standard, for yourself versus somebody else.
And it's a hard thing to communicate sometimes.
Right. Politically, it was a mistake,
Well,
but we had a great time.
Oh, God.
I think Neville said, I can't believe you did
how about
that.
an
Yeah.
embarrassing moment for this
Yeah.
guy? He always, thinks
yeah.
about things. I've been on a board with him. I know how he
Yeah,
rolls.
yeah.
Okay.
All I would say is that there were he's very buttoned up, but I would say there was one time he let his guard down, and it was when we had an offsite. It was a prior firm. It was you have different corporate games and other things
sure.
like that, right? Experiential games,
Yeah.
team building, and what have you. Neville being from Jamaica, I think believed he was a track star.
Oh.
And so
Okay.
all I will say is that you can just picture like chariots of fire or something running along the beach,
hear the
challenging
music.
someone to a race. And so I'm thinking, people are taking, you can imagine, right? People
Yeah.
are taking bets like, you're betting on Neville, you're betting on person.
Oh, so this is really a race.
This is really a race to see.
And what is this, like in Malibu or somewhere, or
yeah,
on
it
the
was
beach?
maybe
Santa Monica.
Santa Monica, okay, near the Jonathan Club?
Near the Jonathan Club.
Okay.
And so anyway, long story short is that he came up a little bit short. You know, I lost a few dollars that day, but
He came up short.
he came up short. He came
Mr.
up short.
Track Star.
Mr. Track Star. Mr. Track Star.
Mr. Marathon runner,
Yes,
right?
Mr. Marathon. Yeah, marathon, cyclist, super healthy, fit, and I'm taking bets. You know, I'm like,
That'll teach you to gamble.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. $5 only.
All right, before we adjourn, tell me something that you think people may never know about you.
Actually, coming out of high school, I got into Wharton. Right, coming out
You
of high
did?
school. Yeah,
So Wharton undergrad.
Wharton undergrad, and I stayed at home because I was the youngest of 7. All my family went to Wayne State. I for sure thought I was going to Wharton, and so I went to all the prospective days and said, no, you're going to go down the street to Wayne State. But the reality is that that's an opportunity to still prove yourself. And it might not, it's no straight line, right? I thought when you're 18 years old, oh, life is over. Life is just beginning, right? And the reality is that I went to Wayne State, met my wife, we've got a beautiful son,
Isn't it amazing how things work out
right?
in the ways we least suspect them?
That's right.
But that was a tough decision for you
That's
at
right.
a very
That's right.
very young age where you were just being formed as
That's
an
right.
adult.
That's right. But you
But you
just
did it.
embrace the experience, right? You get over it, you pick yourself up, you figure it out. I ended up studying in Japan. Don't know if that would have happened, from Wayne State. And I could be a bigger fish in a smaller pond. I'm on a couple boards back there and what have you. And so I'm a citizen in LA, but I'm born and bred in Detroit.
Yeah,
And
and you
it's
kind
kinda-
of live in
kinda
your head a little bit.
live
like,
in my head.
like a lot of us
Yeah,
do.
yeah. So
How about you? Tell us something, Neville, that
Let's see. Well, when I was
you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, this is much more, not that exciting, except for the fact that I was 23 or so, 24, and helped develop a hotel in Puerto Rico. No one knows that. When I was at
Echo
Fishman.
Hotel, did you say?
It was an Echo. It was a resort hotel. Yeah, in the Remar neighborhood or region of Puerto Rico.
And when was
Right.
this?
This was in 1997 or so. That timeline. Actually, was it 7?
Interesting. And what-
No, it was before that. Oh my goodness.
What
94. It was 94.
what led
94.
to that?
So I was at a hotel company called Tishman, a real estate
Yeah.
developer, and
Small
yeah,
company.
and actually, I will. I'm still keep trying to edit, the names, but I got to give credit to the president of that firm, and true story, and this will, I think, round out a couple things that we talked about earlier today. I had my master's degree. I was in the construction department. I was doing all this, estimating stuff and what have you. And I decided before to say, well, look, I want to go talk to the president of the company, because I said, I'm going to go figure out how to get into development, because I want to do something other than construction and all this real estate stuff. And so I sit down with him, and he said, well, great, that you met me, but honestly, I had no idea you were in the construction group, because all this time I thought you were the mailroom guy. Right? True
Oh
story.
my God!
Right?
Oh God!
Yeah.
Was it? It was a moment. I guess it was a moment.
And think about the other African American man in that shop was in the mailroom,
It was a mailroom guy.
and that was in the late '90s. And so, to his credit, it was like, well, I had no idea, but okay, I'll give you a shot. Right?
Amazing.
Just got the shot.
So the moral of that
Give me the
story is
shot.
don't hesitate when
Right.
you have something.
And
Well-
that's how we ended up going to development and on and on and on. So
take your shot.
you got to
Take
take
your
a shot.
and do it with ARC. Well,
Thank you.
it's been
That's right.
great having
That's right.
both of you on here, and thank you for coming on to the podcast. You both have really built better communities for so many people through your efforts in ARC and before that at Canyon, and I wish you guys a lot of success.
Thank you.
Neville
Thank
Rhone,
you.
Quincy Allen, ARC Capital.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Honored
Great
to be
to
here.
see you, both of you.